Welcome back to ExPhi. Today we're going to be looking at a really interesting question, whether or not an artificial intelligence system can read Plato. Now, reading and understanding philosophical text is often seen as a task that really does require rationality, higher order thinking, and abstract reasoning. This seems like something that humans are uniquely able to do. If we encountered a new species and they could do philosophy, if they could talk intelligently about ethics and metaphysics, it would be really hard to deny their rationality. It's one thing if a monkey, a parrot, or a smartphone can do basic math, but it seems to be another if they can offer commentary on Plato or talk importantly about consciousness. In this video, we're going to look at how a artificial intelligence system, specifically latent Dirichlet allocation topic modeling with Gibbs sampling, don't worry if you didn't understand that, will categorize Plato's dialogues. The system won't be trying to do anything too complicated, just divide the dialogues into categories that make sense with very minimal human input. Surprisingly, the program does seem to successfully identify clear topics in the works of Plato, though they weren't the topics that I initially hypothesized. If you want to find out, let's take a look. So my initial plan when I started this project was to test if a topic modeling system would successfully identify and sort dialogues into Plato's early, middle, and late periods. If you're not unaware, this theory of Plato divides his works into three main periods: the early period consisting of dialogues that don't really put forward positive views and are mostly considered to simply document the thoughts of Socrates; his middle period, where the dialogues get more complex and he starts to put forward some of his own views; and the late period, which has stylistic changes and potentially a maturing of his position. Now, this theory is hotly debated, and it'd be interesting either if the machine learning systems supported it or if they didn't. For a refresher on his theory, check out this video from carneades.org. Now, before we dig into the results, let's talk a little bit about what we're actually going to be doing. So what is topic modeling? Well, in layman's terms, topic modeling looks at a group of texts and tries to find topics or groups of words that fit together. Each of those topics is comprised of words, with the words ranked by the probability of being in that topic. So a topic might have words like metaphysics at the top, and you would know that it's mostly made of metaphysics. But it might have other words like substance or mind below it that would be less likely to occur in that topic. So it's mostly about metaphysics, but somewhat about some other things. These topics are then used to delineate documents. So each of the documents that we input to the system gives us a percentage of each of those documents that fit into a given topic, with each document, all the topics adding up to 100%. And once again, those topics are ranked by the probability of being in that document. So if one of our topics was metaphysics and one was epistemology, a document about metaphysics might be 90% metaphysics and 10% epistemology, or something like that. It's important to note that the system doesn't name the topics as metaphysics or epistemology. It simply groups words together, and then we as humans come in and say, based on this grouping of words, what does this topic seem to be about? Because the system doesn't actually know the semantics. It doesn't know the meaning of the words. It just knows which words are connected or close together. The only things that are provided to the system by a human are the number of topics in a document and a set of stop words, which should not be used to create topics. These are often words that are common to all documents, like the or a, but also words that might appear throughout a particular collection of documents. For a bigger primer on topic modeling for philosophy, check out the video linked here from ExPhi. Now, in order to do this, we also need a complete works of Plato in separate text files. For this experiment, I'm going to use the versions available in Project Gutenberg's free library of ebooks, specifically the Benjamin Jowett translation, with the introductory and metadata all removed. So we're just looking at the text. Because these are English translations, they may miss some of the stylistic nuance of the original Greek. And maybe in the future, we'll try this same experiment with the original language texts. For stop words, I include many of the names that are used in the dialogues, as these are very common to many dialogues. So the name Socrates, or another name that's used as a character of the dialogue, but isn't really about the content of the dialogue. And these confuse the system a bit. And the words that appear throughout, such as affirmative responses to Socrates, of course Socrates, is said a lot in these dialogues. So the specific topic modeling package that we used was created for AI research in the humanities and the arts by Daria DE, which is a German institute for using digital technologies to study the arts and humanities. I'll put a link to their work in the description if you're interested. Okay, with all of that primer out of the way, let's dig in and take a look at the results. All right, so starting off, we just ran this system with only 3 topics. Remember, one of the only inputs that we give to the system is the number of topics we think are in Plato's dialogues. My initial hypothesis was that these dialogues would sort out nicely into early, middle, and late Plato. And as you can see from this, that hypothesis isn't really borne out. First, let's take a look at the topics. So the system does seem to be creating topics that make some sense together, but there seem to be multiple topics in here. So topic 1, we've got things like Athenian, law, laws, city, and order that seem to fit into something that looks like maybe politics, maybe philosophy, political philosophy essentially. But we also have things like body and nature and soul and time that don't really seem to fit into political philosophy. Really, it seems like this topic could be split out into maybe metaphysics and political philosophy. Topic 2, we've got men and man, so maybe talking about the human condition. We have good, life, love, justice, so maybe things like ethics and eudaimonia might be a good explanation of this topic. Once again, it's a little unclear. And topic 3, we have good again, so it seems to be bleeding over across topics 2 and 3, but also things like know, think, knowledge, opinion that might fit better in epistemology. So we seem to have a bit of a mashup of a couple topics. And we see that across the different dialogues up here. There is a little bit, late Plato does seem to focus more on this kind of politics, metaphysics mashup we have, and early Plato seems to focus more on epistemology, and maybe middle Plato, you could say, has a little bit more of topic 2 of kind of the good and eudaimonia, but they seem fairly well divided. But you can go through these individual dialogues. So if I go to laws, we can see how it splits out here, if you want just kind of a nice pie chart. If you want to check this out, you can go to carneades.org, go to ExPhi blog, and the blog post on the dialogues of Plato being categorized by AI has this, so you can play with all of the bells and whistles yourself. So coming from this, it seems to me like, ooh, this 3 topics doesn't really capture this very well. So the next thing I did was I said, what would it take to split it out into a bunch of different numbers of topics and see which number of topics really fits? Because right now this seems like too low a number of topics. We seem to have mixed some things in together. This seems to have a little bit of ethics, a little bit of epistemology. This seems to have a little bit of politics, a little bit of metaphysics. So they don't really make sense as kind of a natural kind. So we will next take a look at what it takes to split this out into multiple topics. So when my initial guess of 3 topics didn't seem to work out in the data, I tried pulling in a number of different topics to see what would make sense. So here we have our 3 topics. We can see Athenian, law, government, legislature, law. These do really seem to be a lot of things about politics, but we have a lot of other things mixed in here. We've got fire, we've got soul, we have nature, which seem to fit into maybe a natural philosophy, i.e. the precursor to science, more. We have form, things that fit more into that than necessarily being about kind of politics and political philosophy. So I'm not so sure. And then if we look through these other topics, we'll see how the word cloud appears here. We have man and men, state and good. So once again, it seems to be a bit of a mix of things. We have love, gods, and topic 3, we've got knowledge and know, but we also have good and man. So we seem to have things that are crossing over a couple topics, and soul and nature are pretty big here too. So it seems to me we don't have quite enough topics to categorize these well. So let's take a look at what happens if we put in 4 topics. We'll start up at topic 1 with 4. So once again, we have Athenian, law, state, men seems to fit in here now, life, city, order, God, laws. This seems like a more natural category. We've got government, we've got guardians, citizens, education. A lot of these things, judges, slaves, a lot of these things seem to fit really well into the idea of political philosophy. So this now seems like a fairly well-defined topic. Unjust. Yeah. Now let's take a look at topic 2. So now we've got good as the biggest word here, most prominent. We have evil, so a little bit of ethics. We also have know and knowledge as pretty big things. So this seems maybe a mix of ethics and epistemology. We've got just in here. Once again, we have man and men. Love is in here. Think and reason, kind of pointing towards epistemology. Imagine, maybe philosophy of mind, doubt, epistemology. So they have a little bit of a mixing still going on here, but this seems like a decent category. Maybe we have believe. Maybe this is just kind of an epistemology with a little bit of ethics thrown in. Topic 3, now this seems to be clearly, we've got some strong indications this might indicate metaphysics. We've got body, soul, nature, earth as some of the big ones, but we also have reason up here. That's probably more in philosophy of mind. Pleasure and pleasures, that seems more like ethics or eudaimonia than body, but possibly could be fit in a story about body. We have things like sun, the forms, so it seems like metaphysics, but only somewhat. We've got fire, clear metaphysics and natural philosophy, but also some other things mixed in, maybe. And then topic 4, what do we have? Ooh, this isn't good. Usually when you get a topic like this that's kind of a mashup of a bunch of things, it means that you're not perfectly categorizing what you have. There's nothing that stands out. We've got knowledge and argument and opinion, so you might think epistemology and think. We also have part, nature, art shows up here. First, different, impossible. This doesn't make sense as a logical category in my mind. And so it doesn't seem that 4 is good. So let's take a look at 5 topics. So we click up to 5. We have, as our first topic, we've got pleasure, life, love, gods, pleasures, desires, pain, nature, this beauty. This seems to, lover, death, beloved. This seems to be talking about a little bit of kind of eudaimonia, living the good life, but also some of the dialogues that deal with things like friendship and love, and all of those issues seem to be sorted in here. So I might think of this a little bit as kind of a eudaimonia category that fits here. If we go to topic 2, we see we once again have our category that seems to really clearly be about politics. We've got Athenian law, state, city, legislators, citizen, very clearly separate off this category that's more focused on, we have things like war and states, guardians, punishment, freedom. This seems really solidly in the political philosophy category. Now, gods is in here, which is a little bit in philosophy of religion, but it seems mostly to be really focused on political philosophy. Magistrates, appointed, legislation. This feels really solidly like political philosophy. Let's take a look at topic 3. Ooh, it seems we finally sorted epistemology and ethics out. So this one seems fairly solidly on epistemology. We've got knowledge, know, think, opinion, argument, knows, knew, a lot of words, truth, thought, that fit into kind of a modern notion of epistemology. Explanation, definition, things that might fit into kind of philosophy of language epistemology, maybe a little bit of philosophy of mind, that seem to form more of a kind of cohesive category. We're talking about sophists, we're talking about how you argue, answer, faults. So a lot of these things seem to, in my mind, this seems to be a fairly good category melding together. Let's take a look at topic 4 now. Here, once again, we see, and this way it pops out even more. We have nature, reason, soul, body, earth, form. These seem to be words that are really focused towards our kind of, I would call natural philosophy more than metaphysics. I mean, with the forms, it's a little bit of metaphysics, but more kind of focused on that natural philosophy, the elements, the world, water. We have, I think they're all 4 elements in here somewhere. So there's that sense that this is probably what would become science, but we're calling natural philosophy at this stage in development. So this really does feel like a pretty solid division, at least with some of the biggest things. You've got things like motion, generation, necessary, that fits kind of in the metaphysics side of it. So all of these seem to once again fit fairly well together. And last, topic 5, we'll take a look. Here ethics has finally sorted itself out. We still do have know and knowledge in here, but we've got wisdom, good, just, evil are some of our biggest things, better, soul. These are things that might conceivably be associated with kind of ethics and good and evil. So I'm going to stop here. Feel free, go to the website. If you're curious, go to the website. You can play with any numbers of these topics and any one of the topics. You may disagree. You may think a different categorization makes more sense. Like I said, one of the few things that we're putting into this model is the number of topics that we think there might be in this data set. For now, I'm going to move on with using 5 topics to see how that will split out Plato's dialogues. So the last visualization we're going to check out today is this visualization looking at what would happen if we did that 5 topics. That seemed to make sense to me. Now, in this visual, we're just looking at all of the different dialogues up here, and we're splitting it out, and I've labeled the categories now. So as you saw in the last visualization, the different categories weren't labeled. They were just a collection of words. But I kind of talked through and gave an explanation of why we might think these are epistemology and these are ethics and this is eudaimonia. So this is just topic 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but labeled based on kind of how we found them. And based on this, we can then go through the dialogues and see what percentage of each topic they are. You can see it in this stacked bar chart, or you can actually click through and get a sense in this pie chart down here. The cool thing about this word cloud over here is this isn't actually a word cloud of the dialogue itself, but rather it's a word cloud of the model we've created with our topic model tests how good it is by essentially using the topics to recreate the documents, recreate all the words in the documents. And then the closer that kind of invented document is to the original document, the better that model is. And then we iterate and so on. This cloud tells us not the words that are actually in the document, but the words that would be predicted to be in the document by our model. So that's a little bit to play with, but the big question is, does this divide dialogues by early, middle, and late? And do we see any differences between early, middle, and late? So it seems a little bit we do. So these are the early dialogues over here, and they seem to have this strong focus on the category that we labeled as ethics. It's more than 50% of the dialogues as a whole, and almost every single one has it as a major component. It's also important to note that our metaphysics category, metaphysics in nature, almost doesn't show up at all in these documents, and politics barely registers as well. So it makes sense that our early dialogues might be talking more about ethics and a little bit about epistemology. Now, the middle dialogues, and various folks have sorted these into subcategories of early, middle, and late middle, and that might make sense because these seem to be a bit of a hodgepodge. Parmenides is mostly epistemology. Others, Menexenus is a lot about politics. Meno has a lot of epistemology, but also a lot about ethics. And so we seem to have kind of a mix, a bit of a hodgepodge. There's a lot of epistemology, but I guess that's driven a lot by Parmenides being really overwhelmingly epistemology. And so this grouping doesn't seem to have as clear of a definition, which might correspond with some of the explanations that philosophers have given that these might be further subdivided into various categories. And finally, we take a look at the late dialogues, even without all of the kind of stylistic differences that we might see in the original Greek. These do seem to be set apart, at least in some ways. In terms of metaphysics and natural philosophy, these are very clearly where we're seeing Plato talk about those issues. We see it almost not at all in the early dialogues. We see it a little bit in the middle dialogues, and we see it a lot more in these late dialogues. Similar with political philosophy. You see political philosophy was very small in these early ones, despite us having the Republic in here. Laws, Critias, etc. are talking a lot more about political philosophy. And ethics, despite being the second biggest category, is comparatively pretty small. It's only 18% as opposed to a quarter or more than half for the other areas. So I don't know if this artificial intelligence system understands anything about Plato. But this might be an interesting way of looking at Plato and thinking through Plato's dialogues in a new way. What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Is there any collection of works that you think we should run through this system here on ExPhi? Another philosopher that you think would be particularly well suited for this? Plato works well because he has specific dialogues that you can separate out, but there are so many philosophers, and a lot of them are old enough that the documents and the text are right now open source. So let me know in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts about topic modeling. Do you think this topic modeling system understands anything about Plato, or do you think it's a skeptic like me and it doesn't know anything? So watch this video and more here on ExPhi as well as on carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.